manage the voice in your head, because everything that you're saying to yourself or about other people translates into how people experience you. And it's automatic, and sometimes we're not even aware. So before you work on any other skill, you've got to work on the internal voice in your head. Is it supporting what you're trying to accomplish, or is it getting in your way?
Now, as founders, we love new technology. We love ingraining ourselves into the technical side of the business. And sometimes we can get a little lost in the sauce, if you will, from the technical side. And then as we grow, we then have to take on, outside of our technology, actually take on employees, business partners, and have to grow out of being a solo founder into a leader of people. And that takes a different side of the brain to manage. And that's why on today's episode, I have Therese Miclot, founder of Therese Miclot LLC, where she helps those who are highly technical move out of the kind of ingrained technical side of their business and start leading people instead of code. So Therese, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So I know this is kind of something that hits home a little bit for me because I'm a very technical person myself. And, me and a computer in a coffee shop, I'm good, just, solo. And I've built my business to be around as a solopreneur. So I don't necessarily have to lead people, but I think that's because I'm such a technical person that I kind of just like to do things myself. And then leading people starts to kind of give me a little agita. So give me an idea of like where you come in all of this, and who are the types of people that you're helping, and how are you helping them?
Yeah. Well, usually I'm coming in to solve a business problem, and it's usually around a company that's growing. So a founder or CEO who has built a business, they have a great product, great foundation, and now they're getting ready to grow. And as that CEO is looking inside their organization, they're thinking, how am I going to get ready for people to grow and scale with this business? And that's usually when I'm called, because now it's not about technical problems, it's about leadership readiness. And that's often where people struggle, because we focus on the product, we focus on the technology, not necessarily the people side.
Yeah, I've seen this so often. There's kind of this subculture called like the indie hackers of the world. There's a website called indiehackers.com. It's this community of people who are highly technical. They're builders, they're tinkerers, and they're like me in the sense that they just love to kind of ingrain themselves in the technology and explore by themselves. But then they grow these great products and services and SaaS solutions. And that requires growth in areas that they're kind of unfamiliar with, because they're really good with code, but not so much with like human. So what are some of the first steps that you're taking people on to kind of transition them from being a product kind of minded person to like a team focused person?
Well, it first starts with the senior leadership team or the founder to define what are you expecting of leadership? What does that mean? What does it look like? Because oftentimes I'm brought into companies where that isn't even well defined. So there's lots of different interpretations of what it means to be a leader. So that's usually where we start. Like, are we clear about what would be the expectation in behavioral terms? So do you want people to be good at giving feedback? Do you want them to be good at having tough conversations? Do you want them to be good at helping to share a vision or lead through change or uncertainty? So once we have that as a foundation, then it's a matter of, okay, well, how do we equip leaders to be able to make this jump from super doer, where your identity is attached to your technical skill, and expand it to being effective in all these new areas? And so some of that is through coaching, peer group coaching. Sometimes in organizations, it's like, let's learn this together. This is not a silo activity. If anything, as organizations grow, there tends to be this need to have more cross collaboration. Whereas earlier stage businesses, you didn't need to worry about that, or there's only a few people in the organization and we didn't have to have these conversations. So usually my approach is around identifying, diagnosing, and then let's develop the skill. Let's treat it like any other kind of skill, to be able to help leaders feel like they have the runway to learn and apply it and then see some success from it.
What are some of the issues that you typically run into that people need to learn a new skill to solve when
Mhm.
you're coming into, a new situation?
Mhm. The one that's coming up a lot is how to have tough conversations. And that can be, with a direct report who maybe isn't doing so well, or a vendor, or a customer conversation. So it's not always about feedback per se, but it seems like that's the area where, most of us don't want to have tough conversations. I mean, who relishes
Mm,
that,
yeah.
right? But it's kind of a necessary skill, uh, because as you grow into bigger roles in an organization, you're going to be in situations where you have to manage through conflict and missed expectations and misunderstanding. So that's coming up a lot.
So this is a very, I think, important area, especially as like the generation that is now getting into more senior roles grew up on technology, grew up on coding.
Mhm.
So, and it's only going to become more and more as like the generation below us grew up on
Mhm.
iPads and cell phones and are building their own websites and such.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of like very highly technical people, capable people, and especially just in a generation that did grow up in text messages and such and
Right.
communicated digitally their whole life, to then have to
Mhm.
like manage people is only going to become
Yeah.
more prevalent. So how did you kind of get into this space? Like what was
Mhm.
the area where you were like, this is where I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
and capable of?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to my childhood. So I was 13 years old when my father died rather unexpectedly. My mom didn't have a career, didn't have a, broad skill set outside of raising, myself and my siblings. And so I watched my mom have to now go into the workforce. And I would watch her every day come back deflated, defeated, dreading the next day. And, long story short, it was a lot about her leaders, and where they weren't giving clear direction, or where they were, asking and demanding as opposed to bringing people along. And so I sit there watching this happen. And long story short, I really directed my career to address the biggest problem, which is how can we eradicate bad leaders? Because I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone who has not worked for a bad leader,
Mm.
and it sticks with you. And it also affects you more personally. Like, it affected my family watching my mom come home every day working under a really bad boss. So that's what I, did for my graduate degree was in industrial organizational psych. Then I went into big corporations to do HR. I led global learning and development. I spent a decade in a leadership consulting firm. But that's my why. That's I'm often working with senior people, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about three layers down. I'm thinking about the person that doesn't have as much positional power, that doesn't have as much choice, that is trying to do the best they can under the conditions they found themselves in, and how can I make their lives better?
It's interesting you bring up that as a child, you kind of see your parent and how stressed they were and such, and how that could impact you.
Mhm.
And kind of comparatively, you talk about leaders, and if there's a poor leader, how that can impact their employee beneath them. And
Yeah.
it is kind of like you see the person above you, and that kind of dictates, or as you grow with that leader, that can play a
Mhm.
part in how good of a leader you could become if you're, being
Oh,
trained by a poor leader. So
completely.
by eradicating poor leadership, you're only helping the generations, coming up as well. So,
Right, right. Yeah.
um, and then you have this kind of niche, not just like leaders, but also like technical people who need to start becoming a leader and lead.
Mhm.
How did you find that niche specifically?
Hmm. I think it started because I spent the first decade of my career working in a large industrial automation company, multi-billion-dollar global company, and I just had a real connection with technical people who are just so brilliant, and their identity is so attached to that, and they are sought after, and they had this other side that they had to develop that was so underdeveloped. And I think the reason I liked it is because I feel like I have the exact opposite. Like, I feel like I have a lot of the skill sets around leadership development, and I'm always in awe of technical people and what they can pull off. So I think it's related a bit to finding the balance in what I don't have, and then also being able to give what I have to technical populations that have underdeveloped leadership skills.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would hope the person who can kind of teach leadership is someone who's that's their competency. Otherwise, yeah.
Hmm.
And then so this has been your focus, and now this is like your main, solution that you're helping technical people with. When they do come to you, what's kind of the first steps that you focus on for like, all right, this is priority number one. We need to start here.
Hmm. Hmm. I don't ever start with offering a solution because I think that that's kind of misguided thinking. I do a lot of listening. Because I think that the more the person can understand the shape of their problem, they're more capable of fixing it. And so that's the first thing is okay, let's understand what it is that's the gap that is the biggest problem for you. And then it's about kind of creating that path. So sometimes it's a lot of coaching around mindset because oftentimes I work with a lot of technical leaders who have a very hard time delegating, and so they become a bottleneck in their organization. This is happening real time. So somebody I'm working with, extraordinary, kept getting promoted. Now is stuck because he won't let go of work because guess what? Nobody can do it quite as well as he can. And so when I listen to like what's really the issue, we focus first on okay, let's attack what's getting in the way of you being willing and able to delegate. And more often than not, it's your mindset. It's this belief that like no one can do it quite as well as I can, or everybody's already busy and so I don't want to give that up to them, or you know what, it's just simpler if I do it. So usually we work on mindset, then we work on skills.
Let's kind of double click on that too, because I think that's a large problem for most of my audience because they're typically solo founders, small
Hmm.
teams, and to delegate something out that they're so passionate about, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to like content creation or something where it's like I want to make sure it's in my brand voice. I want to make sure my expertise is expressed correctly. But unless you are a content creator by trade, as a
Right.
founder, you really shouldn't be spending much of your time trying to create content. You need a business to build. So, like, these are certain things that you should be delegating out. What
Mm-hmm.
are some of the practices that you can maybe tease here to help us get over our issue with
Sure.
delegating things that we shouldn't be focused on?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the first is around your mindset around delegation because often we're holding on to that because we think we have to. No one can do it quite as well as us. But if you are trying to grow your organization, the mindset I would offer is think of delegation as development. It's not just about the task. It's about, okay, in 6 months from now, in a year from now, I want this person to be able to speak in my voice, to be able to be thinking, have their thinking aligned with mine. So if you start to reposition it in your mind as, sorry, as development to grow your organization, as opposed to I'm going to, sweep in and do everything. You're first of all training your brain to think in the right direction, and you're more likely to delegate if you can get over the mental barriers to thinking it's useful. From there, here's how I speak about it to my clients. Think of it like a relay, and relay race. You have the baton, so you're holding out on social media. You're not going to just pass that on to someone without some sort of connection point, right? If you want to win the race, you have to ensure there's some warm handoff. They're guided, they're coached before you're just going to let go and hope for the best. So you got to think about where are they at in terms of their capability. How can I hand this off in a way that doesn't put them at risk or the business at risk? And then sometimes it's watch me do it first, then I'll watch you do it, and then you'll own it. So it's not often just a one and done. There's a sequence.
Highly technical people have kind of, I think, a certain way of thinking, typically aligns with their personality or their like hobbies or habits, should I say. Um, but to kind of isolate yourself in a room and focus on a task and get it done yourself, which a lot of technical people love to do because it's
Hmm.
It's rewarding for them to get in flow state and all that.
Yeah.
And then to
Yeah.
graduate from that into a leadership role, and that sometimes those things that maybe they enjoy doing get kind of like pulled away from them because they're more
Hmm.
so managing people than product at that point. How do
Hmm.
you kind of help them balance that, if at all, in terms of like you need to kind of rewire your brain now and find new mindsets or habits in order to be successful in this kind of new
Hmm.
state versus what you used to find fulfillment in?
Yeah. I think the first is to understand what is it about that solo work that you love the most? Is it that you get to be creative? Is it that you get uninterrupted time? Like what is it exactly? Because then let's try to find how that can still be an element in your new role and your new capacity. So for instance, it may not be working specifically on the next gen or next feature, but it could be imagining like the product roadmap further. And so instead of just on the, one feature, you're thinking bigger. You're still using that time, but it's about designing the future, not just designing the product. So I think because who would want to be in leadership if it's filled with things that you don't want to do? Like, and I think there's always room for technical leaders to stay in, as individual contributors and have huge success. But if you want to have more impact across larger groups of people, then we've got to find a balance of that, the things, the characteristics of the work that you love, but now played at a higher level.
Is there elements to this like technical role that need to, because a lot of technical people are very product focused,
Mhm.
but I think as you grow in leadership, you need to also think about how do I translate what we're building and get buy-in from other departments, from maybe they
Mhm.
have to be part of like venture capital conversations,
Yeah.
a higher level C-suite, et cetera. So now they don't just have to think about how do I build this product, but I also have to kind of like market
Right.
and be a little bit more political in my role.
Yeah.
How are you helping them kind of think about ways to put on their like marketing hat
Yeah.
versus just like the highly featured technical side of it?
Sure. Oh, I can't tell you how many rooms I've sat in the back, cringing, watching a technical leader over explain something to an audience that it's flying way above their head.
Yeah.
And so cringeworthy. So my goal is to help prevent that from happening. And so usually the work, if that's the area of focus, is okay, let's first think about put yourself in the shoes of the audience. Okay, so are you talking to investors? Are you talking to a board of directors? Are you talking to the customer? Now, what do they know and what do they need? And so we start, instead of focusing on what you're going to say and what you're going to show and demonstrate, let's first think about who's your audience, what do they need, what do they know? Because that then drives the way you create your message. And it's particularly important. I was working with a really astute technical genius, basically. And his problem was whenever he would get asked a question, he would give this long answer that didn't fit really what the question was. It was over explaining to a group that didn't have anywhere near the technical knowledge that he had. So we focused a bit on how do you talk concisely? How do you use metaphor, especially if you're working with people that don't have a great understanding of the technology? How do you tell story or analogy or metaphor as a way to get your point across, but in a way that your listeners, your audience can get it? So a lot of coaching around that.
I love that concept too, because a large part of that is, my philosophy is around content creation when helping experts translate their expertise into content. And there is that like over word salad of their content because they're trying to get
Yeah.
so much into it.
Yeah.
One of the core things I teach is taking multiple angles for one idea. So taking the core
Yeah.
concept of what your goal is or you're trying to communicate, but approaching it from different angles. Maybe there's a myth, as you said, like analogy, a story, a personal story behind it, a case study. So you're helping
Mhm.
everyone kind of reach the same finish
Yeah.
line, but not everyone understands or comprehends things the same way. So like you're saying,
Right.
tell it to me in a story so I can kind of visualize
Yeah.
it. Tell it to me in an analogy so I can, connect it to
Right.
something I already know, right? So you're just helping everyone kind of get to the same
Yeah.
conclusion, but you have to kind of approach it in different ways. So I really love that concept.
True. And I'll add one more thing is being also good at listening as much as talking. Because sometimes what's needed is actually a conversation. And sometimes technical leaders, their experience up to this point is you come in, you explain the technology, you get out. So it's been all talking as the expert in the room. And I think the higher you go, the more you have to know how do you flex the skill of listening, drawing other people out, and also making sure and validating that your point was understood. So instead of taking a passive head nod, asking a question that would draw other people out. And so, even something as simple as, what's your experience? Or how does this connect to your understanding? Versus the question I wish we could eradicate across all tech presentations is, any questions? Any questions?
That's the last slide of the deck, right? Questions?
It's the last slide of the deck, usually no time left, and it's perfunctory, and most people aren't going to really engage. And so if you walk out of a meeting and you're still not sure, like, how did I do? Did they get it? Did my message land? It's probably a signal that you should double down on finding good questions to ask as much as you focus on your message.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I kind of correlate this to going back to like the indie hackers idea of a lot of people are a lot of technical people are so focused on building something that it
Mhm.
becomes their baby and they're just hyper focused on it,
Yeah.
and they sometimes forget to ask the people that they're building it for what they want, getting
Yeah.
feedback and working that into it. And sometimes it's just so in the code themselves that they don't, or
Mhm.
maybe they don't even have the skill set to have those conversations
Right.
externally in order to like
Yeah.
work it into it.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of coaching a group that's having a problem with the product marketing person and the head of engineering. And it is this big friction point because, exactly like you said, they're not talking. And so engineering's going down this one path and they are, blinders on to get to this deliverable. And product marketing's coming and they say, we need a different feature or we need an enhancement, and they're not talking to each other or involving each other enough in the process along the way. And so it's creating not only conflict inside the group, but it's delaying product feature rollout. And at the source of it is, like you said, it's this lack of involving people at the right steps.
Right. So your, we'll say like ideal client who you're trying to attract, I think is growing probably day to day with just like I
Yeah.
said, like the technical space continues to grow,
Hmm.
and the people's ability to be a technical person's ability to be a leader is just a constant. So, but how are you utilizing your personal brand and how are you marketing yourself so that
Hmm.
people are finding you and knocking on your digital door?
Well, I'll say I probably can use some advice, but I will tell you where I've begun, and that is that I believe that we have to be findable. And so the thing I've doubled down on is LinkedIn. I have a newsletter. I post regularly. I create videos. I do LinkedIn lives. So that's been where I've been focusing a lot of my attention. Uh, Podcasts. Also offering simple, easy things for people to be able to experience what it's like working with me and getting value from it. So I've been trying those approaches to become more known and build my brand.
So let's go through each of those individually. So we'll start with podcasts because that's the most relevant.
Yeah.
Um, what's been like your goal with podcasting? Because I think there's a few different approaches people get into guest podcasting with. One is I want to reach that person's audiences, and hopefully someone within that audience would be a client of mine or come into my
Yeah,
community, or
sure.
it's I just need a format to be able to capture content and thought leadership, and then I'll repurpose that into
Hmm.
content on other platforms, social and whatnot, amongst other things. But like, how have you getting into guest podcasting? What's kind of been your
Yeah.
approach for it?
Sure. It's the kind of the first goal, which is to become known and be reachable to audiences that can use my service. So that's been the first part of this year has been all that. But to your point, now that we're in the back half of the year, I'm beginning to realize that I haven't utilized all the content to be able to repackage it on my website in different formats. And so it's so funny you mentioned that because now I'm saying I have content that I haven't activated yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the underutilized and under discussed strategy behind podcasting too, is or guest podcasting at least, is that repurposing process. But I mean, a lot of people,
Mhm.
it's easy to kind of show up and be a guest, but then the back end stuff of repurposing and all that stuff is,
Yeah.
obviously a process. Um,
Yeah.
let's jump into then. You mentioned LinkedIn,
Mhm.
content creation there. Are you doing mostly content, or are you also doing like outbound and reaching out through like connections and such?
Yeah. I think probably maybe your listeners can relate to this if they're building their brands is we tend to go, and I know this about myself, I go to the place where I'm most comfortable, not necessarily where I need to go. And so I have learned that I've been over indexing on creating content and right videos and reels and all this stuff. And I haven't been doing enough direct contact. And this is like everything, I think it's like this mental shift you have to make. And the shift that I'm in the process of making is, boy, do I hate it when I get DMs because most of it is like heavy sales, and I can't think of one that has turned me into a client. And so my struggle has always been, well, how do I differentiate myself? Because I don't want to be lumped in this group of people that just hit everybody with DMs that are clearly just mass marketed content. And I've been working on overcoming my resistance to direct messages.
Yeah, I can very much relate. I think many, probably 50%, if not more, are of people who friend request me, are just trying to pitch me on their service. And
Mhm.
my biggest pet peeve is when people request me, and then I'll be like, "Oh, are you looking to like explore opportunities together, or are you just growing your network?" And they'll be like, "Just growing my network." So I'll say,
Mhm.
"Okay, cool. How can we like add value to each other's lives?" And
Mhm.
they won't have an answer. And I'm like,
Mm.
what was the purpose of connecting then if you didn't want
Yeah.
to, connect and
Right.
explore together? Like
Right.
you can just follow me if you want my
Yeah.
see my content, but
Yeah.
connecting,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
That's my little rant for the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So content creation, how are you thinking about that? Was there like, do you follow your own system, or is there just like a, hey, if something inspires me today, I'll write about that?
I'm pretty disciplined about it. Like I want to have a kind of regular bank, if you will, of ideas or content, and a lot of it comes from lived experience. Of, oh, I just had this great coaching conversation with someone, and we really worked on this one skill, and I can offer that more broadly. So I work a lot on developing it. I use Taplio
Mhm.
for just being able to kind of manage the order of it, and uh, and so and then I'm always on the lookout for what ways can I add value to my growing audience, and I think that's the kind of core to how I can feel good about what I'm creating. It's not just about, I don't know, making general content. I'm always thinking about how would my ideal client experience this, and is it worth it amongst all the noise of every other message that they're receiving. So I try to be pretty disciplined about it.
Yeah. I'm familiar with like the $5 rule.
No.
So the $5 rule is if you're putting out a piece of content, would your ideal client pay $5 for that post, essentially?
Oh.
The information that you're giving, is that worth $5 to them? And that's kind of your
Yeah.
gauge for the value. of the posts you're
So
putting out.
interesting. Oh, I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
It's a really good litmus test.
Yeah, it's a good, and I think that helps with like the quantity versus quality. You
Yeah.
know, yes, we want to stay consistent and relevant and top of feeds, top of minds, but at the same time, as you're mentioning, like you spoil your brand if you don't provide the quality content, the $5 worth of
Hmm.
content when you put
Hmm.
that out there,
Hmm.
because you
Yeah.
never know when that's going to be someone's first time seeing you, as you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, podcasting, content creation. I'm sure like referrals are easy for you because I'm sure technical people know other technical people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's been my way I've grown my brand and business has always been through referrals. I think that's probably true for most people. My word for the year, so I always try to have like one clear intention for the year. And for 2025, the word is amplification. And I want to go beyond the reach of the referral network that knows me well and can speak and offer testimonials on my behalf to a whole population that is in need of this but doesn't know me. So I've kept that as my North Star for the year is how do I get found? How do I amplify my message and my brand?
Yeah, I think that's what you just said there. I think is kind of like um, a statement that everyone listening is, I think, has pinned up on their board as well, because we're experts at something, and we can try our best to create content or show up on podcasts to like promote it, but at the end of the day, like we really want to make sure that we're hitting as many people as possible, the right people as possible with
Yeah.
our message,
Mm.
which can be difficult when everyone else is trying to do the same thing.
Right.
And so, yeah, like you're saying, you're kind of battling the noise of people's
Yeah.
feeds. What's
Yeah.
been your experience with putting out your message? Or do you see people kind of inbound coming to you? Or do you see kind of a correlation between like your efforts in the more content you put out, the more inquiries you see come in?
Sadly, no.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the the puzzle to solve. So I post 4 or 5 times a week. I really have doubled down on content, but I don't get a lot of DMs or things that can convert to a project or partnership of working together. And I'm still struggling with that
Mm.
because here's what happens a lot. And I think maybe because my audience is one that doesn't interact with content that much. And I don't know if it's because it's elderly millennials or Gen X, but this is the funniest thing. Like, I'll get people that will like text me, that was a great post. Like, oh, I learned so much from that. And I'm like, can you please just like it?
Engage with it.
What?
Yeah, help me out
Drives me
here.
it drives me nuts. Or I'll casually be running into people, acquaintances, and they'll say, I love your content, it's so useful, it's so good. And it's like they have never once interacted with anything. And so I get a lot of anecdotal feedback that says, to your $5 rule, that it's adding value, but it's not converting.
Yeah, I think that's a problem many of our audience can relate to, because we're good at, this goes back to the technical people trying to create content that will resonate with their audience, but sometimes there's a misalignment between what they know will resonate or how to package the idea into something that will resonate. Um, and so, yes, we want to give information, but there's like more of a strategy behind the content packaging and approach, that it's valuable, but is it actually driving action? And I
Yeah.
think that's usually the missed strategy approach step
Hmm.
with many people, is like, even if they're getting a lot of views, even like a lot of views, a
Hmm.
lot of likes, a lot of comments,
Yeah.
but no
Yeah.
DMs, no leads, no
Yeah.
clients, that's because it's really good content, but is it also packaged in a way that's driving an action, that's making you a thought leader,
Hmm.
where people go, okay, this person has an offer behind what they're talking about. Let me go
Hmm.
check that out on their profile. And then things like
Hmm.
to optimize your profile so that when people land on it, Are they like, oh, I know what this person does, and I know why I'd use them. Let me opt into that. Do
Mhm.
you do any? You mentioned some things in terms of like mini experiences where people
Mhm.
can understand a
Yeah.
little bit more about what you do. Can you describe a
Yeah.
little bit about what those are?
Sure. Sure. I have one that's a low lift for anyone that particularly is technical, that has resonated with this idea of delegation as a sticking point for them. And so I offer a 30-day program. So it's a real quick sprint, and it's using the research behind habit building. So you get live interaction with me, and in addition to that, a tool that helps you turn this idea of, okay, I need to be better at letting go, let's say, but just the thought isn't going to turn into behavior. So I have a tool that enables you to take that thought and now turn that into a behavior over 30 days. In addition to that, a custom GPT on delegation. So when you're wrestling at night with, like, can I give this to this person, or what's the risk, or what's the benefit, there's tools that supplement it. So the goal is that in 30 days, you have been able to recoup 10% of your time, because now you're much more effective at delegating. And so short, for individuals, doesn't have to be a company that's completely behind it. And also, because I've worked in large organizations, I know the second half of the year is when people are trying to work on their development plans. They've gotten feedback, or they've gotten a direct, indication that this is going to derail them if they want to grow or advance in the company. So trying to hit people at the sweet spot where they know this is a pain point, and there's a very clear way we can address it.
And if people wanted to check that out, where can they find that?
My website, so theresemiclot.com.
Therese, this has been awesome. I loved every second of this. As a nerdy technical person, I resonated with so much of this. I always like to end with, if you were speaking directly to, your ideal client right now, and there was just one thing you could tell them to help them impact their day today, what's one thing you would tell them?
Yeah, I think it is manage the voice in your head, because everything that you're saying to yourself or about other people translates into how people experience you. And it's automatic, and sometimes we're not even aware. So before you work on any other skill, you've got to work on the internal voice in your head. Is it supporting what you're trying to accomplish, or is it getting in your way?
I could use that one too. I appreciate that. Great. Again, amazing. Where can people find you and some of the things you talked about today?
Sure. So my website's going to be the best place to go, Therese Miclot, all one word.com. LinkedIn, of course. So I am trying to add not $5, $10
There it
worth of
is.
value every single
Yeah.
post. So I have a newsletter there, and yeah, I'd love to continue to add value to your audience.
Wonderful. Therese, this has been great. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks.
All right. And that will conclude another episode of the Personal Brand Blueprint.